Valtteri Bottas was on the latest episode of Formula One's Beyond the Grid podcast, and there were many interesting things to learn. At the time of recording, Valtteri Bottas is without a driver's seat in Formula One in 2026, and in this interview they dive in deep about the options ahead of the brand new season. Now, Beyond the Grid is a fantastic podcast from Formula One, and there's been many reviews on this, so do check out the playlist in the link below. Do smash a like on the video if you like watching content about Valtteri Bottas. The first thing that we notice straight away is that it's not by design that he's not in a driver's seat in Formula One in 2025. The question asked to him was like people like Fernando Alonso who take breaks from Formula One. Maybe he needed a year out, that's why he hasn't got a seat in Formula One, because Valtteri Bottas, in fairness, is worth his weight in gold in Formula One. 10-time race winner, multiple times on the podium, as well as 20 pole positions. So if Valtteri Bottas is not driving in Formula One, it's clearly by choice. But what we go to find out is actually there were no offers on the table from anybody. He said he always wanted to race in 2025. He always wanted to be in a seat, and I think his preference would have been Sauber at the time. But as you know, Sauber went on to pastures new. Not only did they not have Bottas, they did not have Zhou Guanyu either. But he said the number one thing in his life has been always Formula One, and it always will be. And this is why he is actually a reserve driver at Mercedes at the time of recording. He said he had considered all of his options elsewhere, other motorsports as well. But for him, the Formula One was the be all and end all. The reason for this as well is because he wanted to keep up to date with the 2025 regulations. He wanted to keep up to date as well with the new regulations in 2026, and being the reserve driver in Mercedes is not going to harm him in any way, shape or form. Of course, he will still be up to date. He will still be learning from what's taking place this season. The sport keeps evolving, and so if you're missing for like even a year in terms of completely being out of Formula One, then by the time you come back, so many things would have changed and you're just not up to speed. Being a Mercedes driver also gives him a bit of insight into what's happening in 2026, and he mentioned the fact that Toto Wolff and Mercedes in general are not hiding anything from him. Even though like he might be having a different team in 2026, he's still got a bit of insight of what's to come in the next couple of years. And this is why he stayed, and he thought, you know, with that kind of in the back pocket, this would help him with a Formula One seat in 2026. Because when you think about people like Sergio Perez or you think about Daniel Ricciardo, these are people that are completely away from Formula One. They haven't got a reserve seat, and so how much information can they be gathering over the year if they were to come back to Formula One in 2026? Could they be behind the 8 ball already? People like Zhou Guanyu though at Ferrari as a reserve driver there, again, wealth of knowledge, wealth of experience that he's going to be learning, and of course he's getting to test these cars out anyway. So the first thing definitely that we learned, that Bottas had no doubt in his mind that Formula One is where he wanted to be. But what was quite surprising is the fact that the reason he's not driving in 2025 is not because of the offers he received he didn't like. It was purely for the fact he had no offers. That is odd to me. That is very strange. I can't imagine that teams in Formula One in 2025 would not be having a look or having a conversation with Valtteri Bottas and looking at bringing him in to the 2025 and 2026 season. And when you think of some of the drivers that are getting a bit of luck at this moment in time in terms of having a race seat, it's quite astonishing to me as to why he wouldn't be in Formula One. The second thing that we did learn on this podcast, of course, that moment where he drove the McLaren in Barcelona, private little showing that was taking place there. He drove a 2-year-old McLaren MCL, and this has been something that's been talked about for ages. Imagine Bottas in a McLaren suit. But of course, McLaren have Mercedes engines, and so therefore there's a bit of partnership, there's a bit of combination, and Valtteri Bottas is able to drive any Mercedes powered engine car in terms of testing, in terms of like filming days and everything like that. But he spoke about how he was like, you know, he loved the car. He said it's a great team. He spoke glowingly about McLaren, and I've never seen a connection between McLaren and Valtteri Bottas in the past, but he talked about how much of a great team it is and how the car was really good. It was really fun to experience, but he already acknowledged and noticed the changes between the 2023 car or 2022 car even to the 2025 car. But what kind of shocked him the most in that car as well was the stability in high-speed corners. He knows that the car was good on high-speed corners, but when it came to the stability, and just, you can imagine he's had the experience of the Sauber, he's had the experience of the Alfa Romeo, and what that's been like in the corners, in the high-speed corners. The McLaren just seems to stick and fit right. And bear this in mind, 2022 McLaren is one of those McLarens that kind of like, it went through the mire. We had ups and downs with that McLaren, and yes, in the end it was, you know, quite a strong competitive car, but in the beginning it was absolutely horrific. But just him speaking glowingly about McLaren, it kind of just got me thinking, maybe this story isn't quite over between Valtteri Bottas and McLaren. Now look, McLaren have got perfectly good two good drivers in Lando Norris, Oscar Piastri. But maybe there could be something on the reserve scale. Maybe there could be something else going on there. You know, the Mercedes kind of family relationship connection is one that Valtteri Bottas is going to be firmly steeped in, and this can only be good for him anyway. So yeah, good stuff to see with him with McLaren, and it was quite pleasant as a McLaren fan myself to see Valtteri Bottas talk so glowingly of the Papaya team. The third thing that we learned as well, that he drove the W11. So they mentioned the fact that, you know what, he's been driving, testing little cars here and there. The W11 Mercedes, of course, the 2020 Mercedes, the Mercedes in which Lewis Hamilton won his 7th world title. Bottas, of course, was teammate of Lewis Hamilton, so he was obviously familiar with this car. But straight away, he drove it in the Paul Ricard circuit in France, and he noticed straight away, like, look, this car is so much lighter, it's so much thinner, it's so much better, and he much preferred that era. And as I've been arguing for many episodes of many podcasts and everything like that, that we need to get these cars lighter again, make them smaller. I made a video about the Monaco Grand Prix, whether it should still be in Formula One. Everybody blames the circuit. Everyone's talking about how the Monaco Grand Prix is boring. But people, the cars are ridiculous. They are massive, they are heavy, and they're just not that, you know what I mean? They're a bit too reliable as well. They're a bit too strong for my liking as well. But you know, just the fact that he enjoyed and loved the W11, it was a great car, and I'm sure when it, you know, it all came back to him when he was getting those race wins, those pole positions, those podiums. I'm pretty sure like he's missing being at the top end of a Formula One grid. And I'm pretty sure for any other Formula One driver, they prefer that type of car in terms of eras. We then dive into the options, so that we started talking about the options of where Valtteri Bottas could go in 2026. And the first question that was posed to him is, what about Mercedes in 26? And he was quite clear to say, look, realistically, no, Mercedes are quite happy with their team at the moment. Kimi Antonelli, of course, is the future. George Russell, consistent performer, doing very well in that Mercedes. But here's what I will say. Both Kimi Antonelli and George Russell's contracts end at the end of 2025. At the time of recording, they've not renewed any contracts for either driver. Bottas could slide right in.
Damn!
Although he mentioned the fact that Mercedes are quite content with their drivers. And then we just moved on the episode. We just kind of moved to the next topic, which I was gobsmacked at. I was thinking, no, you got to hone in. You got to talk about more options in 2026. Where else could Valtteri Bottas go? But then, of course, you know, this is being an official Formula One podcast. I'm sure there's some boundaries that they can't cross. And I'm sure the presenter wanted to ask some serious questions. But hey, here we are. But lo and behold, we got back to options in 2026 because we were talking Kimi Antonelli. We kind of went into like a deep dive of Kimi Antonelli and his progress there. And, you know, it was very much like, okay, here's where we're going. We're talking Mercedes and everything else like that. But then, you know, the presenter came back and said, look, let's get back on track and talk more options in 2026, to which I rubbed my hands with. Now, Red Bull was the next car that was brought up, and I thought this is an interesting question. The reason for asking this question, there must be some sort of truth behind it. There must be something going on there. There's a reason he's asked this question, because to ask Valtteri Bottas whether 2026 Red Bull would be an option is really left field to me. It was really strange, a strange question, and I was intrigued to hear what Valtteri Bottas had to say after. He said, and the funny thing is, he kind of gave the expression of like, see, the car doesn't seem easy to drive. You know, the different drivers that have gone in there, with such big potential, you would obviously think that they would be more than capable of driving the Red Bull car, but many drivers have struggled, both novices, experienced, top talent, steady eddies, like they've all gone there and they've all struggled. Even this moment in time, Yuki Tsunoda is currently struggling in that Red Bull after they've already kicked out Liam Lawson. But Valtteri was like, look, they've got a big academy. They've got, you know, I'm pretty sure they don't even look outside of their driver academy. They've got so much going on. Of course, you've got the Visa Cash app, RB Racing Bull team as well, where there's a lot of drivers in there. You know, people are linking Hadjar to that Red Bull seat. I beg you, do not do that. Leave that boy alone. But it was very much like, you know what, he said, you know, I think you need a more experienced driver to be driving in that number 2 seat. Almost like a hint to say, I know a guy who's got a lot of experience in Formula One that could probably do a half decent job in that Red Bull and probably might understand a few things that other drivers just haven't tapped into yet. And honestly, like the longer I think about it, Bottas in a Red Bull wouldn't be the craziest thing in the world, because he's a seasoned Formula One driver. He's won races, he's been on pole positions, and he's been in winning teams. So he would know like the expectation, he would understand the pressure, and I think with the experience he has, I think he would know what to do in terms of steering the car in the right direction. Not that it's necessarily a wrong direction at this moment in time, but just something doesn't quite click at Red Bull at this moment in time. But interestingly enough, when he was asked like, did you consider Red Bull in 2025? Because obviously the contract at Sauber was running away, he sort of said, it was like he had a lot of information to say that he didn't want to sort of spill out, but he kind of gave us some little bit of juice. He said someone at Red Bull is not a fan of him. So in terms of the 2025 talks, like they got shut down quickly. Who is that somebody that is, that doesn't like Valtteri Bottas? Because that's what he mentioned. He just said, look, someone doesn't like me. Someone's not a fan of me at that camp. And it seems to be one person. So I'm intrigued to know. Comment down your thoughts below. Who could it be? Could it be Max Verstappen? Could it be Helmut Marko? Could it be Christian Horner? Like, who on earth could it be in Red Bull that doesn't like Valtteri Bottas to the extent? And it's very clear that it's one individual. And I just wonder, like, if somebody is sort of like in and around like there, or is leaving, or is left, or maybe, you know, Adrian Newey, I don't know if he has any say on what drivers go to teams, but I'm just intrigued to know, like, you can't just drop juice like that, Valtteri, yeah, and not give us more. And then the presenter didn't give us any, didn't sort of, you know, push Valtteri on that, because I was hoping he would stay on that and it would be a big story. Because I think since this podcast was released, since the podcast was released, there's not been a big topic or talking point around Valtteri Bottas and Red Bull. There's no conversation there. And I think there needs to be a conversation to be had. We moved on to Alpine, another discussion there going on with Alpine and saying, look, could that be a prospect? They've got Mercedes engines in 2026. And he said, look, it's a good team, but it's just a little bit like there's not really, it's not very stable at this moment in time. And he mentioned the fact that, look, they've already replaced another driver, and it's like, depending on what happens on these next weekends, that driver is under pressure as well. Obviously Alpine's a bit of a mess, and I'm pretty sure like there's so much potential with the Alpine team, but then if you're a driver, like, go at your peril. Do you know what I mean? Like that is your own risk. That if you want to, it's gambling really to join Alpine. But he was saying, like, look, there was discussions with Alpine for 2025, not necessarily with himself, but mainly his management team. And just like his management team would be looking at all other options, it wasn't necessarily something that was going to be concrete, but they'll be sort of surveying the land, if you will, in terms of other teams to sort of accompany Valtteri Bottas in 2025 and 2026, all depending, because the contract was running out with Sauber in 24. And the reason that he didn't really commit like to the Alpine kind of prospect is purely because he was thinking about the Sauber project. You know, as far as he was concerned, he was moving into the Audi era with Sauber, and yeah, something went awry. And that reveals the fifth thing, because look, leaving Sauber kind of happened very late. He found out after the Brazilian Grand Prix that he would not be driving for Sauber, for F1 Kick Sauber team in 2025, which is bizarre, honestly. And I must admit, I'm actually very disappointed with Sauber on this one. I think that's very poor to treat a driver like that, like Valtteri Bottas. Somebody, you know, treating anybody like that is just not on, in, you know, full stop. And Sauber could argue, look, we were trying to negotiate, we're trying to think, you know, which way do we want to go? Is it a case of, you know, do we think Valtteri can do the job basically properly? And then they obviously went with Nico Hülkenberg and Gabriel Bortoleto. But the thing is, like, to tell somebody like, of Valtteri's status in Formula One, and you know what, I seem to realize that there's a lot of disrespect around Valtteri Bottas in the Formula One world, if that makes sense, among the fandom, among the teams, just the way, like, you can't treat one of your drivers like that. Somebody very well experienced, he's been here a long time in Formula One. Like, when you do go back to those Williams days, when you go through that Mercedes era, and then he's been at Alfa Romeo, has now turned into Sauber, you just think to yourself, they could have done so much better with that. I think it was just poor. And the reason I'm very upset and annoyed with it is because the reason now there was no offers in the first place for Valtteri Bottas is because of how late he knew that he was not going to be at Sauber. Because there's only offers on the table if really, like, if you're committed to Sauber, where are those offers going to come from? No one's going to be like, here, have this contract whilst you're going to be the Sauber driver in 25, 26. It doesn't make any sense. So the fact that they told him so late is just really poor. And so therefore it was too late for him now to start scrambling and looking for a team. The Brazilian Grand Prix is one of the last Grand Prix of the Formula One season. What was there, like 2-3 races to go after that? It wasn't many. And so for him to now go find a team to go ahead and do that, in fact, it might have been the second last Grand Prix for all I know. Every team's stacked. Everyone's got their drivers now in place. And I just thought that was absolutely poor from Sauber. The other option that was brought up is a Cadillac F1 team. Yes, Cadillac are very much now here in Formula One in 2026. Valtteri Bottas, of course, is excited about the prospect of joining them, maybe because it's a brand new team. You start from scratch. You know, you're looking at the new regulations. You know, there's ample opportunity, and somebody like Cadillac is going to want experience. So Bottas kind of has the upper hand in that sense, and he can probably choose his options. He wants to be in Formula One. He wants to stay in Formula One, as indicated very earlier in this video. So Cadillac F1 would be a beautiful prospect for him to join. And so, you know, I think there's conversation going on. Didn't want to spill too many beans, but I think there is a conversation going on. But also the Cadillac talk is quite intense because everybody's trying to work out who Cadillac are gonna go for. You've got Sergio Perez, there's Mick Schumacher's talked about, Joe Guan Yu, Colton Herta, even drivers like Danny Ricciardo. Like, you know, you just never know who could be joining that Cadillac team. It's quite hot press at the moment. But the target in which Valtteri Bottas wants to know what team he's driving for, he's given it August. At the time of recording, we're in June. So, you know, a couple of months to go, and literally, like, Bottas needs to know by then which team he's driving for. So people have got to get the pins moving and see what happens. And what he loved about the prospect, look, it's very interesting. It's a blank canvas. You're starting from scratch, which makes it very motivating and very rewarding when the success comes. That's absolutely true. If he was to succeed at a Cadillac team, for example, where he's starting from fresh, starting from scratch, which I guess he was hoping would be the case with the Audi team, but with this team here, you know, if he can really make something happen, make something work, that would be so fantastic. It would be a great story as well. So highly motivated for sure for Valtteri Bottas, and yeah, the reward must be beyond what we can imagine. Number 7, the question that was asked of whether or not he would be racing in like 10 years time. Valtteri Bottas loves racing, okay? No matter what, he is going to be driving, whether it's in Formula One, whether it's in another motorsport altogether, 2 wheels, 8 wheels, whatever the case may be, he loves racing. He's loved racing his entire life. And so Formula One is definitely on the cards. He's hoping to be here. I mean, the guy's 35 years of age, but we've seen drivers over 40 still going in Formula One, in one of the pinnacle of motorsport. So there is no reason why Valtteri would say anything else. You know, Formula One and motor racing has been the absolute love of his life. This is the first year in 2025 when he's not been racing since he began racing. And even if like he was to go to like say IndyCar, for example, he knows that he would have to commit to a lot of years there, because of course he'll be learning something entirely different. And before you know it, it could be 10 years already when he's in that sport, because sports seasons, they go so quick, they go so fast. And even endurance racing, he was saying, why not? You know, Le Mans looks very interesting, but he was very quick to say, look, let's just stop all the other sports at this moment in time. Formula One is my focus. That's where I want to be next year and in 10 years time as well. So regardless, he's going to be driving something, but at the very start, his heart's desire is definitely Formula One still. But even ending that conversation when he was talking about embracing something different, he was very much like he's open to anything, and it's good to, you know, just to see where the wind takes him is a statement that he used, where it's like Valtteri of old would never say that, but this Valtteri, you know, anything is open. His drinks collection is absolutely insane. We already know about the gin company that he had. Apparently 33,000 bottles were produced in the first year in Europe alone. Fair play to them. It's just him and his partner that are currently running that whole sort of gin company. So it's quite independent, quite indie, nothing crazy in terms of the marketing other than the fact that you're Valtteri Bottas. But, you know, that's besides the point. He's also got like a wine company as well. So, you know, that's been going on. And we've always known that he's been a lover of coffee. And he was like, you know, yeah, I'm slowing down on the espresso, because he was known for being a heavy espresso drinker. And he says, look, I try to have things in moderation. You know, as they say, moderation is key. So, you know, I stick to about 5 espressos a day. Now, you know, laughing and everything. It was a good conversation. How true it is, we have to wait and see. But these are athletes at the end of the day. They've got to keep their bodies in tip-top condition. But there was a lot of, you know, a lot of liquid talk. You know, we're talking drinks here, coffees, wines, and gins as well. So yeah, Valtteri Bottas all over it. And the companies are still going, and they're still, which is good to hear and good to see, because businesses, you know, they start and they collapse very, very quickly. But a man like Bottas' stature, I think, was always going to remain strong, just like his drinks. The ninth thing we learned, every driver recently is now being asked about, for 75 years in Formula One, what is your favorite moment? What is something that you will always remember of Formula One? And it's interesting, the drivers I always assume would choose something of their own memory of themselves. Bottas might say his first ever win in Formula One, his last win in Formula One, a specific pole position, things of that nature. But instead he talks about Mika Häkkinen, absolute legend in Formula One. He talked about Häkkinen's first win in Formula One with McLaren in 1997 in Jerez. And he said Mika Häkkinen is such a hero. And the presenter asked him, oh, how comes he's such a hero? And I'm sitting there thinking, is it he's a Finnish guy? He's also a Finnish guy? Like, you know what I mean? Like, of course, driving for Formula One, it would make sense. In that case, he could have chosen Kimi Räikkönen, but he chose Mika Häkkinen because he said, look, he remembers him when he crashed in 95, where he was in a coma, he nearly died. And to come back, and not only come back to be just racing again, but to come back and become two-time Formula One world champion, like, it's like his biggest hero ever. He specifically spoke about that first win in Jerez, where, after everything that Mika Häkkinen had gone through, he managed to go and win a Grand Prix, and that was like the beginning of things to come, because he was always such a talented driver, and we thought we might lose a bit of edge with Mika Häkkinen, but no, we had a two-time world champion in that man, the king of Finland. And the fact that he's a world champion in Formula One and from Finland, then Valtteri Bottas is an easy inspiration for him. And we close with this, where he says, you know what, he's still got more to give, and it proved it when the last couple of months at Sauber, his qualifying laps were really impressive. Maybe the car was coming back together, but also him, highly motivated, still ready to go. Valtteri Bottas looks like in good condition as well. He doesn't look tired, he doesn't look like he's fed up. He looks like somebody who is eager to get back into the Formula One paddock. Formula One is his passion, and he absolutely cannot wait to be in Formula One in 2025, maybe, but definitely in 2026. Great podcast, definitely. Enjoyable watch. Valtteri Bottas, more to give. I can't wait to see Valtteri Bottas back in Formula One. He deserves to be in a main seat. Comment down below which team Valtteri Bottas should be joining in 2026. YouTube thinks you will like this video over here, or check out my playlist on the other Beyond the Grid podcast reviews. Until next time, lights out.
Man from Finland who's about to become the 107th different winner in Formula One. For the first time ever, Valtteri Bottas wins a Grand Prix.